So welcome back to Everything Marketplaces, where we talk with marketplace founders and leaders from some of today's top marketplaces. So this is episode 29, and I'm super excited to welcome on Sara Mauskopf, who is currently the co-founder and CEO of Winnie. So Winnie is a leading marketplace that millions of parents use to easily find childcare with trusted service providers and is backed by some of the best investors and funds in Silicon Valley. So Sara, it's great to have you join us, and let's maybe start off by you sharing a little bit more on your background for those that don't know you and what led you to start Winnie.
Sure. Hi everyone, I'm Sara. My background is in tech as a product person. I started my career at Google and then went to what was a startup at the time called Twitter and worked on the product there for 4 years, and then went to another startup called Postmates, which just finally announced today it was acquired by Uber, which is super exciting. And kind of throughout my tour of tech companies, I was the thing that struck me was a lot of the people I worked with, like just really amazing, high quality people that many of them have gone on to do incredible things, but just had a lot of talent, especially on the engineering side. And what struck me when I became a parent, which I did while I was working at Postmates, I had my first daughter, was realizing that a lot of this talent in building technology solutions and marketplaces was not being applied to a lot of the problems I was facing as a parent. And I thought there was really an opportunity to do that. And I also met the woman who is now my co-founder at Winnie. I met her at Postmates, and she was also a mom, is a mom, but was a mom of two young kids at the time. Her name is Ann Halsell. And she kind of had the same observation as me, that a lot of the kind of amazing people we had worked with throughout the course of our careers were not working on technology for parents. And so that really led us to quit our jobs at Postmates and start Winnie, and build something for parents, which today is now the largest marketplace for group childcare and early education in the United States.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing more on that. So what were the first steps, when you quit your job and, the first steps of starting Winnie?
Yeah, so when we first started Winnie, we really had no idea what it would be. And lots of people ask me, like, how'd you come up with the name Winnie? It was under like our category of like random names, because that's kind of how we felt at the time. We were just like completely randomly taking shots in the dark on what the heck we were going to build for parents. And the first version of what we built does not resemble the Winnie that we have today. It was like not a marketplace. It had nothing to do with childcare. It was like a user-generated content site, kind of borrowing from our backgrounds working on user-generated content at places like Twitter and Quora and YouTube. We kind of figured, like, let's do the same thing for parents. And it turns out that wasn't really solving a real problem that parents had. And so it took a good amount of time, like a couple years, embarrassingly, to realize that we didn't have product market fit, and that one of the big problems that parents had was actually finding childcare. And that was sort of a very first order problem. And once we realized we could help with that, that was a huge inflection point for us at Winnie.
Nice. And then I was going to ask about that as far as our product market fit kind of as a marketplace. Could you maybe share more about, what kind of stage and point of time that was?
So it was a couple years in that we kind of had a come to Jesus moment where we realized that people were using this thing that we built, but they weren't really promoters of our product. Like we measured the NPS, the Net Promoter Score, and we had a bunch of detractors, like people that wouldn't recommend our product, even though it was a free thing, because they just didn't really find it that useful. And when we dug into the data, we did find that there was one tiny sliver segment of people that found a lot of value in using Winnie. And that was people who came to Winnie to search for childcare, which was not really even a use case that we had really considered or elevated in the product. And what was also interesting was this sort of coincided with a moment in my life and my co-founder's life where we both needed childcare ourselves for our own kids. And we realized like a lot of the problems we had faced with newborns were different from the problems we had faced now having multiple kids and needing to find daycare and preschool for them. And so it was sort of like this aha moment, like, of course, this is a real problem we can solve. These other things were like maybe cool free products and but weren't solving a core problem for parents. So we initially started in just San Francisco. We started getting very comprehensive data about every licensed daycare and preschool in San Francisco. And we did this very manually. And we launched it like in a local mothers group in San Francisco. And it just kind of took off like wildfire from there. People were sharing it without us telling them to, which was kind of a novel concept for us after 2 years of like kind of pushing this thing and trying to get people to use it. Like finally, when we launched our childcare product, like people were sharing it without us asking them to. And that's when we realized like we were onto something. We expanded to the rest of the Bay Area, then we expanded to all of California. And that has sort of been the playbook we've run ever since. We are now in over 30 states with fully comprehensive data on every licensed daycare and preschool. And now we also have the providers who come on and claim their listing on Winnie and use our product to connect with parents who are searching for care.
That's awesome. Thanks for sharing more on that. So I actually did have a question as far as from a monetization side as a marketplace. Do you charge the providers?
Yeah. So one of the other big aha moments for us was realizing we were a marketplace. It took us some time to think of ourselves that way. And once we did, it was like a massive breakthrough because we are not a transactional marketplace. And I think that prevented us for a long time from thinking of what we were doing as a marketplace with providers on one side and parents on the other. But there are marketplaces that are not transactional. Like Zillow is actually a great example. They're a very big marketplace, but the actual purchase of the home does not happen on Zillow. It happens offline. And that's the exact same thing for childcare. Like you find a childcare provider and you may schedule a tour or submit an application online, but you then go and meet the provider in person, and that kind of decision to enroll happens maybe a few weeks later in an offline setting. And that's okay. Like you don't have to be a transactional marketplace to be a really big marketplace. And once we kind of realized that, we realized like that's how we monetize. We monetize as a marketplace. And the way we make money is providers who have open spaces to fill will pay for those leads because those leads result in enrollments. And a lead is really just a proxy for the transaction, for the enrollment. We don't have to actually capture the transaction as long as the lead is priced correctly. As long as we understand what percentage of leads enroll, we can kind of back into what we should charge for a lead for a family that's interested in childcare. So kind of realizing we could be a marketplace even if the transaction doesn't happen on our platform, as long as we capture the lead, helped us kind of figure out how we would make money.
Awesome, awesome. And then on the provider side, could you maybe speak to as far as like the the size and kind of scale of the provider kind of network or supply that you have?
Yeah, so there are, probably 300,000 licensed daycares and preschools in the United States. We have over 200,000 of them listed on Winnie, so have a page on Winnie. And a good percentage of those are actually claimed. So the provider has interacted with our platform. They've set up an account and a password, and can log into their business and manage that page. But what's interesting about the supply of group childcare is there's also kind of like a network of unlicensed providers that we today don't touch. We only work with providers who are licensed and regulated by the state, because those are the only ones, frankly, that we have information about, since we get the information from the state licensing database. It's also, an important safety measure, because the licensed providers have, been background checked and inspected. And so the state has done a lot for us in, all 50 states. There's kind of some level of regulation. And so kind of by deciding to work with just the licensed providers, it has kind of allowed us to kind of bootstrap our marketplace, and have a level of safety and protection that would not be there if we worked with just unlicensed or unregulated providers.
Got it. Got it. Thanks for sharing more on that. So at what stage, or maybe it was from the beginning, but that's super interesting as far as, focusing on the licensed providers and that trust there, and kind of verification. At what stage of that, as a marketplace, did you introduce that?
From day one. So I think that was another, interesting learning when we first started realizing that like we could help parents with childcare. We started talking to parents, and asking them like, do you know if your childcare provider is licensed? Have you checked on that? Have you read the licensing report? And in every case, every parent we talked to had not actually checked that their provider was licensed. They assumed they were licensed, and they definitely not read the licensing information. And we realized that this information that was public and should be available to parents was not accessible, and parents were not realizing they could even look this up. And this is like your most important, one of your most important purchasing decisions, like your children and their care and education, like you're entrusting someone with that. We wanted to elevate this information. And so it's one click away on Winnie to get to the licensing information, to read the inspection report. We pull in data when we can about like, are there citations? Have those been substantiated? And it turns out that parents really like this data and information. So it was also a big selling point and reason for parents to come to Winnie and search for care.
Nice, nice. Yeah, I'm not a parent myself yet, but I can only imagine how important it is for sure. So. So I did kind of have a question for you, as far as on the, on the parent side. So I feel like there's probably like a strong sense of kind of community around parents. So how do you kind of cultivate that within your marketplace?
Yeah, so this was one of the relics of our initial product that we've kept around. We've pretty much sunsetted everything else about the first version of Winnie. And like whenever someone was like, oh, I used you back in 2016, like I get really embarrassed because our initial product was just like not what it is today at all. But one of the things we did keep around was our community. So we have forums where parents can ask questions and get advice on all aspects of parenting, and providers can also participate in these forums. So there's a lot of places on the internet where parents can ask questions and get advice. But a couple things set us apart. One, this is a place where providers can also participate, and providers are incredibly isolated. They don't have communities that they can ask questions and get advice, and they're providing a lot of the care for kids. And so even just like simple things that parents go to other parents and ask about, providers, are, just flying blind, or they don't have the same community where they can vent or get support. And then we've tried to make our community really inclusive. So we, wherever possible, like, don't call it a product for even just parents. Like, we talk about it as caregivers. We definitely don't just say this is for moms, even though like everyone assumes that like just moms must be using you. Like, no, like dads also look for childcare and also have parenting questions. And that is a selling point for the moms on our product, that dads can also be involved and not locked out of this important information. So I think like those things have been useful, because parents do look for childcare more than once over the lifetime of raising kids. In fact, like, it was surprising how frequently people shop for this thing. I had assumed that this was a thing you shop for like once or twice. Like, no, it is a thing that you shop for almost every year. Even if you don't make a new purchasing decision, you revisit your options. People have new kids, they move, they age out of the infant daycare and want a toddler program or want a more formal preschool setting. And so the community has been super useful for keeping people around and engaged, so that when they're making the next purchasing decision, they are coming to Winnie.
Nice, nice. Yeah, that was actually going to be one of my questions as far as frequency and being top of mind. So
yeah, I mean, it's definitely not a daily use case.
yeah.
We're doing our job. You shouldn't be looking for childcare that often. Like, you should find a provider you're happy with and can stick with for the long term. But it is more frequent than we imagined, and the providers know this too. Like, the biggest businesses in the childcare space serve families from like birth to age 12 and beyond. Like, they're providing infant care, toddler care, preschool, aftercare. They're providing like camps and summer programs, because they know the value of a family is really, really valuable if you can continue to monetize that same family.
Got it. Got it. Interesting. So I do have a question because, you're at some sense of scale that's quite impressive. And also it sounds like thriving community. So could you maybe speak to, your kind of team, like the size of the team and kind of and maybe how that's kind of changed over the different kind of like phases of growth?
Yeah. So we are almost all engineers and product people. That is something that is changing. So we are hiring for many, many roles. If anyone knows anyone, we're going to have them all posted on winnie.com/jobs soon. But I think that, we started out wanting to build a platform. We still want to build a platform. And that's why we've kind of biased towards hiring product and engineering people. And I think that will always still be the biggest function in our company. But it's also important as we grow to have more customer facing roles. So we are, staffing up on the sales and support side of things, so we can actually be out there interfacing with daycares and preschools. Like, we should have people on our team that have a background in childcare and early education. We have some, but it hasn't been a core focus. And I think that needs to be going forward, since this is what we do. This is the business we're in. We need to have people on our team that can work with other organizations in the space. Like, it is a very fragmented market. There are tons of players. It's a huge industry. It's $60 billion in the US alone. And we need to be collaborating with other players in the space and kind of making the pie bigger and better. And so we want people on the team that can help with that. So I think expanding the team outside of people that are just like building the thing, from a product and engineering standpoint, to people that are taking it to market, and thinking about how we get to the next phase.
Got it. Awesome. And then do you have a sales team, or is to onboard or help with claiming some of the supply side as far as the providers, or?
Yeah, so we've been very light on the sales side. Like, you're looking at our head of sales right now. Um, and I think like it's time to not have that be kind of a secondary function in the company, because I think there is a lot that we can be doing with and for our customers and potential customers. Um, and we need, like, this is not everything can be completely self-serve. So we've biased towards, like, let's just make it all self-serve so people can easily sign up and do it all on their own. But this is the daycare industry has been around for a very long time. It's not the most tech savvy industry. Like, in fact, over half of these businesses have no website outside of their Winnie presence. They are not even on Yelp or Google. And so it is much less tech savvy than our audience of parents. And when we think about building for this side of the market, I think it is actually very important to have a human component, kind of not just like in terms of how we kind of support these businesses, but also, like, it's an industry that very much runs on people and brand and connections. So I think there's a lot of roles that can't be filled by just technology alone.
Yeah, certainly. So how has COVID impacted your business? So
it's my favorite question.
I'm assuming you get it quite a bit.
So it was very scary in March and April when like 50% of our search volume like just went away overnight. Parents who had means to do something else were not searching for childcare. They were sheltering in place. And so we were like, oh, has the market just like shrunk by 50%? What are we going to do? And then things started to change. So in May, as stuff started opening back up, like, the search volume came back very, very strong. And we've since, I think it was September, been having our like best months ever and setting new records. So we lost, a good, we should be growing every month, but we lost, growth from like March to September was kind of just like getting back to where we were in February. And now things are really growing, which is amazing because cases are surging higher than they ever have been before. But I think people are, realizing that childcare is essential and they need it to work and live, and they have no choice but to use the service. So that has been really, really encouraging for the childcare industry. And we've also, done a number of things to try to make things safer, including, like, one of the new pieces of data we collect about every provider is their COVID health and safety measures. It is a big cost for the providers who are taking on a lot of these new measures, like including small ratios, consistent pods, new cleaning procedures. And we want providers to be able to get credit for what they're doing and like charge accordingly. And so that is now like a very important feature of Winnie, is that data that we keep updated and that parents are searching for. The other thing that COVID has done for our business is it went pretty much overnight from being a supply constrained market to a demand constrained market. So it used to be the case that there just like weren't enough spaces at top providers. Now every provider is operating at 50% capacity pretty much. And some of that is due to new restrictions and ratios, but a lot of it is due to just the churn that the industry has experienced. Like, everyone has looked for new options. You probably don't go into an office. You need something near your home, or you need something different. You want a different setting that you feel more comfortable with. And so that has made our marketplace really, really valuable. So it has been a very good time for our business, but at a time when a lot of providers are struggling. So it's not like we can go raise prices because they can't afford that. But at the same time, we've gotten a lot more kind of providers willing to pay us because they need the leads that we're able to provide them with.
Nice. Thanks for sharing more on that. Yeah, it's interesting to kind of hear about how some of the marketplace kind of dynamics are just getting kind of flipped around during COVID.
Yeah.
So I had a question for you, and that was about your funding. So you have some pretty impressive investors and funds backing you. So could you maybe share a little bit more about your different kind of funding rounds and what that journey was like?
Yeah, funding is one of my, it kind of like gives me hives when I start to think about raising money because it's like so detached. It feels very detached from like building the actual product.
Yeah.
But it's important. It's like the air we breathe. Without money, we can't do what we're doing because we are not profitable yet. So initially, like, we raised what I think people refer to as like a pre-seed round of funding. We did not have a product. We did not even really have a presentation. This funding really came from people that we had worked with in the past that either did well in their careers and had money to fund us, or were now investors. And that was instrumental because, if we did not have these connections and were, just random people with an idea, I don't think we would have received that initial round of funding. I think after that pre-seed round, it started to be more about the idea, the market, and what we had built kind of as we increased in funding rounds. So our Series A, I think, was primarily about traction and the size of the market and the opportunity, whereas the pre-seed round was really like all about us and the people we knew. And I think because of that, it has gotten harder and harder because you can't bullshit this. You have to show real traction. And certainly for a Series B, which would be like our next round of funding, no one gives a, they want to make sure you're a decent person, but maybe some investors don't care. But it's really about the traction, and can you then be $1 billion business with some scale? Like, they want to see that line, that path, and they want to really be able to understand how an infusion of cash can get you there. So it just becomes increasingly about what you've built. But in many ways, that kind of resonates with me more. I didn't like this, even though I benefited from the system. It kind of gives me hives to think that I have to like sell myself and like tell a story and be a visionary, because that's not really who I am. I'm like a builder, and I like to hit numbers and goals. So even though it's, I think it's gotten a lot harder to raise money as time has gone on, I like that there are now very clear milestones that I can rally the team around in terms of growth and revenue and traction to raise our next round of funding, or like be profitable. Like, frankly, if we hit these milestones, we'll be handily profitable because our business is very low cost to operate.
Awesome. I had to ask, and I can totally relate to you with that. Cool. So we're going to jump right into questions, if that sounds good to you here. I have a few kind of messages here. So let's see. Hey, Kyle, did you want to come on?
Sorry, I was on mute. Thank you, Sarah. Like, I really enjoyed hearing your story. I run a company that one thing that I heard about you saying is that people will come onto your to your platform, and they'll fill out kind of like the rest of like an application that you have. Is that correct? Was I hearing that right?
So parents come on Winnie, they search for, providers that would meet their needs, and then they can message those providers through Winnie or submit an interest form. So that's pretty much as far as Winnie goes. Like, we actually don't handle applications or enrollment. We definitely don't handle payment. It's kind of to that initial interest or inquiry.
Okay. Do you automatically do you upload all the providers first, and then they fill out the information?
Yeah, so providers all have a listing on Winnie. And I think this was like a big difference between Winnie and like anyone else who has attempted a childcare marketplace, is like, we didn't care if they work with us or not. We created a page for them because we wanted to make a resource that was really valuable to parents. And that meant having every provider have a great page on Winnie, whether or not they work with us or not.
Okay. So I'm glad you clarified that for me. So right now, I have a business called Good Find, where we've actually, have about 500 plus food trucks on our platform. And so people can come onto the platform and pre-order from food trucks, and also book food trucks for their events. And so what we did was kind of similar to what you've done as far as like adding the providers. So we pretty much preloaded up all the food trucks, or most of the food trucks in the nation, on our platform. And so what happens is food trucks will see it and they'll go claim their page, and then they'll add like their updated menu and their schedules and stuff like that. And I wanted to know, like, for your providers, like, how did you get them to come onto your platform and update that information? Or was it like, how was that process? Or what type of information did you add for? Was there an incentive? And like, how did you guys go about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's been that's like one of the number one metrics we care about and track. We've built a lot of automated outreach systems to reach out to providers and let them know they have a page on Winnie. We've also tried to make it really easy for them. So things like one click. Oh, hi, Jennifer.
Hey.
One click to claim your listing and update the information through your email. Like, just tried to meet them where they are. But I think it is a challenge. And ultimately, like, the thing that has brought the most providers on the platform was not anything we did, but having the audience of parents. Like, the demand is the thing they come for. We can list them all day and be like, here's this cool interface to claim and update your information. But it's when they were receiving inquiries from parents through Winnie, or they get a call outside of Winnie and the parent says, we found you through Winnie, that they are incentivized to really check it out, because that's the thing they need. And then we did see during COVID, like, it was the best thing for provider engagement, because they had lost a ton of families. They needed new families. They suddenly had a reason and time to engage with our platform. And it also forced them to use technology. Like, many providers did not have a computer, did not have a working internet connection in their business. And suddenly they were forced to figure out all these things. So like, I absolutely hate saying COVID is the best thing that could happen to our business, because providers are hit very hard and many of them have gone out of business. But it was the best thing that could happen to our business.
Gotcha. That's great to hear. It sounds like we're on a good trajectory too, because we're doing some of the a really similar thing as far as like outreach and providing that like really simple step to add on trucks. And I can say the same thing about COVID being a blessing in disguise.
Yeah.
For us. So thank you. Appreciate it.
Awesome. Well, I definitely am going to check you guys out because I love food trucks.
I'll put the link in the chat.
Yes, please.
Awesome. Cool. And then I think Rich, do you want to come on?
Yeah. Hey, Sarah. As someone that's having a baby, my first baby next year, I was super excited to hear that you were coming on. because I definitely need to use your marketplace as soon as possible. The question that I have is I'm quite fascinated by SEO, and I was going through some of your, first of all, your setup and your page is great, you know, with all the location SEO that you've got going. And I looked at your stats and you're getting like 250,000 organic hits a day, I think. Can you talk about your SEO strategy, and is that something that you kind of had in the culture of the business from day one? Is it something that you outsourced? How did you approach that?
Yeah, so SEO has been very critical, probably too critical to our strategy. So my co-founder was a very early employee at Quora that grew a lot through SEO. And so she was a huge proponent from day one of SEO as a driver of growth. And it was a thing that like took a very long time to start working. And many times we were like, this is, you know, we should not have all our eggs in this basket. This is a terrible idea. So I wouldn't recommend it as a growth strategy to anyone because I feel like it takes a while to pay off. It may not pay off. It actually didn't work for us until we kind of pivoted to childcare, because that was sort of a corner of the internet that we found that wasn't online, where we didn't really have competition. And then we also just got lucky, like at the same time that we were gaining traction, care.com, which is one of our competitors on the SEO side, like had a big snafu with listing unlicensed daycares and had to take down a bunch of their pages and kind of abandon that business of theirs. And so it was kind of a mix of focusing on it and luck. And I don't think it's a amazing strategy, especially because it is very hard to rank for most things these days. It either is like finding something that hasn't previously been online at scale, or like finding a new thing that people are newly searching for. But it's very hard with like, it's very hard to unseat kind of existing players. You know, we still lose out in search results to Yelp, even though Yelp doesn't care about daycares and preschools really, and has a very poor product for it just because they've been around for so long. So it's a hard strategy, and it also, you know, just it's a risk because you're not incredibly diversified. And now we have other channels, which are, I think, important, and you know, will help us kind of be a more defensible business. But SEO is free, which is the nice thing. Like, it doesn't cost money, so you weigh that against paid acquisition channels.
So if you could go back in time to when you got your first kind of like pre-seed check or seed check, would you have like not spent as much of your investment in that channel? Or would you have done more paid ads from an earlier stage?
I mean, knowing how it's worked out for us, I would have invested as much as we did because it has paid off. Like, we still get the majority of our traffic from search, and we rank organically, which is, you know, huge for also relationships with providers who, you know, may search in their area for childcare and see who is ranking, or may search for their own business and then find that their Winnie page is ranking and want to claim it. So it has been very important for us, but it also took a long time to start working. Probably wouldn't have worked if not for like a series of fortunate events, and like maybe will not get us to the next, you know, million users or so. And so I mean, it's easier now also to develop other channels that we have money to do that. But it took a long time and was hard to initially tell if it was even working or going to pay off. So I probably would have tried to develop other channels so we had like fallback solutions.
Perfect. That's really useful. Thank you.
Awesome. These are some good questions. Hey, so I think Jennifer, did you want to come on? I think you guys know each other, right?
Yeah.
Awesome.
We're in a different group for kind of family focused startups.
Nice.
Hey Sarah, I was just going to ask about when you're onboarding providers, like kind of before you start to achieve liquidity, where you've got a lot of transactions running. How do you keep the leads warm? Like our specific situation is like we got this big deal with Walmart where we can now add all of our like pre and postnatal services to the baby registry. But like the Walmart PR announcement about it, all that's delayed until at least February. And so people, I feel like we've like been onboarding them like with this promise of this big Walmart deal that's going to lead to a lot of demand. But right now it's not happening. And so people are starting to be like, well, I've been on there for 2 months and I haven't gotten anything. So like, how did you guys kind of keep people warm while they're waiting?
I think the demand was key. Like we had to have demand first. And we did not really try to go after any bigger relationships until we had the demand. Like we, focused on getting home-based providers to claim their page on Winnie, because if they didn't see results, like that's okay. But we didn't go after like KinderCare or Bright Horizons or like big players in the space until we felt confident we could show them results. And in fact, like we probably waited way too long because they all came to us being like, hey, you're outranking us in search. Maybe send some of those leads our way. That said, like we do, I think 2 things. Like one, we do have like regional chains that may want to advertise on Winnie. And in some cases, like they are not in regions where we have strong traction. And so we may like decide either not to work with them right now or not to sell them too hard, or like price our leads accordingly. But the nice thing with the kind of the structure of most of our agreements with kind of larger entities is we kind of do things on like a pay per lead basis instead of like a flat rate pricing. And so if we don't send them leads, they don't pay us. And so we do have partners where like some of the regions that they're promoting their locations, they see fewer leads than others. And like, because we've structured the deal so that they're not paying when they're not getting value, like they're pretty happy just keeping that contract running till the day we are able to send them leads. So I think like setting the expectation has helped. Like, look, we don't have a lot of traction in Arkansas right now, but you're free to promote your locations in Arkansas. We may send you a lead or 2. We're only going to charge you when we send you someone that is good and ends up, converting to an inquiry in your program. Has helped. But like, I think if we had sent them no one anywhere, like probably they wouldn't be as happy. Like, I think because
like it's such a catch-22, right? Like we have to have enough of the supply side to ink the deal with Walmart, but then Walmart's going to take a while to send a, always a game.
I mean, I think the other thing we do, and this is why like having other channels besides SEO is helpful, because SEO takes a long time. So we could have great data in Arkansas and like we don't rank. And so having other channels where we can put paid acquisition on Arkansas, if we really want to show results in Arkansas, is helpful because it allows us to, get users on our schedule rather than on SEO's schedule or Walmart's schedule in your case.
Right. My follow-up question would just be, we've gone back and forth about doing directory style listings in terms of listing people who have not signed up yet. Because we tried it a little bit and we started getting pushback from people like, I didn't give you permission to list me here. So like, how did you guys handle those situations? Do you just take people down if they don't want to be there?
So we only work with licensed childcare businesses. And I think this is like the kind of big insight and aha we had was like these businesses are licensed, this data is public, it should be available to parents, but it wasn't. So we don't work with like individual babysitters or nannies. We don't work with unlicensed and unregulated providers. So the data we have on their business is actually public and should be accessible. In some cases, they still do ask to be taken down, especially smaller providers. But we've done a lot to kind of understand why that's happening in cases of like home-based providers. It could be that they don't want their address listed. So we actually made a change to never show an address for a home-based provider, only show a general information, general vicinity of where they are. So I think we've done a lot to kind of understand what the concerns were with being on Winnie, and making sure that providers like have control so that their business is well represented on our platform. And I think that's really cut down on the number of, they can also say like, I don't have openings, and then we don't really show them in search results, which was another big issue for like small providers. They were getting inquiries and they didn't have the space. It was more of a pre-COVID problem. But
so that's more of like your SEO strategy in terms of, right? Because there's lots of providers in my area when I've used Winnie that are like, showing up that don't even have their own websites or other things. Like you guys are their only listing.
Yeah, but they're still licensed and in like the state licensing database. So they, their information, they're a business, and that business information is public, even if they don't think of themselves as a business and think they're just like a small home-based provider. They are technically a business.
Well, thank you.
Awesome. Hey, Sarah, I actually had a question for you myself, and it's a super interesting to hear about the marketplace model with the per lead and charging on the provider side. What do you see as kind of like the future of Winnie, maybe in the short term and long term? Are you moving into it being transactional, or could you maybe share more?
Yeah, I mean, our vision is to make quality care and education accessible to all families. And so I think as far as like the models of how we make money will really just be what can best support connecting all families with care and education. We've started our focus with early care and education because it's been the hardest thing for families. It's also the reason that women especially drop out of the workforce. It has like an outsized impact on a child's future, like the early education they receive, those 0 to 5 years. And so that's kind of been our starting point, but we are already, and COVID has kind of accelerated the expansion into elementary age kids in care, because with many schools being virtual, parents still need care for their 6 and 7 year old. Like you can't leave them home alone with a laptop to do online schooling. And so we've kind of moved a little bit up the age spectrum sooner than we had planned. But there's also like increasing access. So right now, only 50% of families are buyers of early care and education. So that means 50% of families of kids are missing out on an early education that we feel is really foundational for every child, regardless of the working status of your parents. Every child should have access to preschool. And so, there's a lot we can do there to increase access. There's actually like quite a bit of funding for subsidized childcare that doesn't necessarily get in the hands of the families and providers who need it most. And so there's just a lot of work to be done to increase access, and then also kind of like work up the age spectrum to serve the care and education needs of all children.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for sharing more on that. Cool. So I think we have time for like one more kind of last question before we kind of wrap things up. Hey, Levi, did you want to come on?
Yep. Hi. Good morning, everyone, or
Hi.
wherever you might be. So I've got two questions here. The first one would be like, who is the primary customer for Winnie? Is it the service provider? Is it the family? And then the second follow-up question I have, if you want to just touch on that lightly, is when looking at the value stack and looking to sort of add new services, to Winnie, is commerce something that you guys are thinking, in the near future? And then commerce, I mean, directing them to what's the sort of the best stroller, what's like the best item for X, right? Depending on age. So thanks, Sarah.
So as far as I mean, we have two. This is like the thing about marketplaces is you have more than one kind of constituent. We definitely think of both parents and providers as important users that we build for. And as far as who pays us money, it's the providers. But the thing they're paying for is access to the parents. And so at the end of the day, when we think about if we ever have to make a trade-off between do we build this thing that makes us more money from providers, but makes parents' lives more difficult or makes their search harder, we always trade off in favor of the parents because the demand is the thing that we have that is so valuable. So that breaks any ties, though there's not, usually a lot of, I could see would we advertise a provider that is low quality? No, because that would be harmful for parents using our service. So I think that makes having that framework of parents trumps all. We need to do things that are helpful and make parents' lives easier and better and increase the quality of the care they receive, makes it kind of easy to make decisions. As far as will we ever do, sell things besides daycare and preschool, I think the other services we will expand into will be related adjacent services. So things like camps and aftercare. We already kind of have some of this on our platform, but it hasn't been as core of a focus as daycare and preschool. So I think expanding into those adjacent services would be the thing we do before selling strollers, which are not really a thing people are coming to Winnie to do. Even if we have the right audience to sell strollers to, I don't think they're coming with high intent to buy a stroller. They're coming with high intent to transact on childcare and early education.
Awesome. Thanks, Sarah.
Thanks.
Cool. Well, this is super insightful, Sarah. So thanks again for taking the time, to join us and share more. So is kind of given your experience building Winnie, which we're of course all quite fascinated by. Is there any kind of last, maybe key learnings along the way that you'd like to share with us as marketplace founders?
I think understanding our business model sooner is the one thing that I wish I had done differently if I could go back in time. I made a billion mistakes. Everything was a mistake, basically. But I think that core thing is the one thing I would change, is kind of understanding how we were making money, understanding that we could be a marketplace even if the transaction didn't happen on our platform, because that would have made us understand that lead capture is very important, and what who were the audience that we should go after. It's not just any parent, it's parents with high intent to purchase childcare. I think it just would have clarified a number of things if we kind of had the business model from day one instead of year 4 of building this marketplace. It would have been a lot faster, and that is always, hindsight is 2020, but I'm glad we've gotten to the point we're at now, even if it took a little longer than I would have hoped.
Yeah, definitely. It's quite amazing what you built though. So definitely congrats, to you and the team on that. So, well, cool. That's a great way to kind of wrap things up here. So time for a quick kind of plug. Where can we keep up with you?
Well, you can find Winnie at winnie.com. That's the most important place to go. I am at SM on Twitter and at SMAUSK at SMausk on Instagram, where I share constantly. So you'll soon unfollow me if you follow me there, because I will overwhelm your feed, but that's where I am.
Awesome. I'll include that in the details of this post once when we get it posted. So, well, thanks again for joining us. This was really an awesome chat, and I know super helpful for us all here.
Thank you.